On December 9th, The Hollywood Reporter broke the exclusive scoop that Netflix Cowboy Bebop had been cancelled, a mere 3 weeks since the show's debut. The rest of the trades soon picked up on the story, and from there, the embarrassingly premature cancellation of Cowboy Bebop was picked up by every website, blog, and YouTube channel covering the entertainment industry. Usually, shows are cancelled with little fanfare, as news like these are normally swept under the rug. But this got almost more attention than the show's initial announcement, which is unusual. And adding insult to injury, fan reactions to the cancellation generally ranged from indifference to outright schadenfreude. We'll explore all of that in this editorial, as we go through how this could have gone so wrong, the responses to the cancellation, and finally, which lessons should be taken away from this. Of all beloved animes, of which there are many, Cowboy Bebop is among the most beloved. As such, you would think that a live-action adaptation of it would be an instant hit. The powers that be at Netflix must have thought so for having greenlit it in the first place, but clearly, it was anything but. Usually, this is where I would do a detailed breakdown, down to the cellular component, of everything the Netflix adaptation did wrong. And I'll certainly do that for our imminent Masters of the Universe Revelation postmortem, but I have to admit that in the case of Cowboy Bebop, I don't have the detailed knowledge to perform such a detailed autopsy. However, the broad strokes of what went wrong are so plain and self-evident, it should have been obvious to everyone. Except, I guess, to the people Netflix chose to spearhead this adaptation. Because therein lies the problem. They were the ones who messed it up. There is no law of nature that says that any live-action Cowboy Bebop adaptation must be bad. On the contrary, all the ingredients for an excellent series were there. It had the required budget. It had an overall decent cast. It had a distinct visual and auditory image, similar to the anime, but also appealing enough that if paired with the right kind of storytelling, audiences could be brought into this. Clearly, none of those latter points happened, because what this production didn't have was a writer's room capable of allowing all those other aspects of the production to shine. I'm sure many of the individual writers in isolation could have done better, but not in the company of some of those running the room. More on that later. But when both the built-in fans who know the source material and the professional reviewers who don't are in agreement the writing is the weakest link, then the writing is clearly a main issue. The writing problems boil down to the confusing and poorly thought through structure of the narrative, both within each episode and across the season as a whole. And this manifested itself in the storytelling and in the editing. When something is off with the storytelling, other issues that you otherwise could have forgiven stand out more, such as the writer's penchant for bringing in some quote-unquote woke moments, as well as them making changes specifically to make the series less problematic and to avert the male gaze, in compliance with the cultish normative doctrine ruining many a writer's room these days. There are two major aspects to the character of Faye Valentine. One is the superficial but immediately obvious, namely what she at first glance looks like. And the other, and far more important, is how the writers choose to portray the character. I'll deal with both of those in turn. First, the superficial change, namely the looks. When pictures from the production were released, many a fan were none too pleased with how Faye Valentine had been changed for the series. And this change would have been the one made specifically to avoid the male gaze. Costume designer Jane Holland told Insider.com that, "I do have to say, as a woman, I felt resistant to the idea of the lead female character being gratuitous or overtly sexualized. It's not about it not being revealing, It's not about any of that. Which is Hollywood speak for that's exactly what it's about. But she continued the PR bullcrap, saying, "It's actually got all of those elements. But my take on it is that it's designed by a woman, and it was made by a lot of women, and it's worn by a woman. So the same elements are there, but they have just manifested in a different way." For another example of the exact same spiel, see how Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn was sexed down in Birds of Prey. But as I said, this is the most superficial layer. How the character is written and portrayed is more important by far. Alas, many took the disappointment expressed by a number of fans and ran with it, making less than savory remarks about the fans at large. One of them was Faye Valentine actress Daniela Pineda. What she should have done here was to remain quiet, or if anything, say she understood the skepticism, but hope fans would check the series out instead of passing judgment on still pictures, as she was confident the work they had done would speak for itself. Something along those lines would have been the appropriate response. Instead, she said this.
Hey guys, so as you know, our Cowboy Bebop first look dropped today, which was so exciting. And I just wanted to address a couple of things that sort of keep coming up in the comments amongst fans. First, I wanted to apologize to the fans that I did not anatomically match the Faye Valentine character. 6 foot, double D size breast, 2-inch waist. You know, they looked everywhere for that woman and they couldn't find her. It's kind of weird. So they just went with my short ass. I know, am I right? You know, there was talk about like, can we put Daniela in a time machine and maybe give her different parents so she has different genetic information to sort of make her look better? It proved to be too complicated. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was I apologize that the outfit I'm wearing is not exactly what she wears in the anime. You know, we tried. But doing stunts in tissue paper, things disappear, they rip. Sometimes they got sort of slurped up in my various crevices, never to be retrieved again. So we needed to really build something that could withstand the test of time. So just, you know.
I don't know if the idea to make this video came from Pineda herself or if it came from her publicist. If it came from her, she needs to get a publicist to keep her in check. And if it came from her publicist, she needs to get a different publicist, because this video did not portray either her or the show in any kind of good light. Quite the contrary, even a healthy number of people that didn't mind her casting in the first place soured on the show in its aftermath. I don't mean to be too critical towards Danielle Pineda here, she is a fine actress, but in casting her, they did cast against type. There are times when casting against type does work. Just look at Michael Keaton as Batman and Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. But they are the exceptions and not the rule. If anything, the rule seems to be that when you cast against type, like Topher Grace as Venom, or literally anyone in Josh Trank's Fan 4-stick, it won't go well. As I said in the beginning though, there are two aspects here. One is the superficial visual, in which Pineda isn't a perfect fit. But that could have been forgiven if the writers had written her character in a manner which elevated what she could bring to the role to a whole different level. There was a lot to work with there. The uninitiated might dismiss Faye as an airhead put in there just to please the male members of the audience. But even an as casual a fan as me knows that in the original, Faye was an intensely flawed and powerful woman, with nuanced appearances that hinted at her true intentions and offered commentary on how desperation and loss can shape a person. More than her figure and skimpy outfit, that is what defines the character. That's what the writers should have given Pineda to work with. Then she would have nailed it. But they didn't. Instead, they wrote Faye as an annoying and vulgar in-your-face loudmouth, with few hints of the subtle and crafty behavior of her anime counterpart. That's on the writers, and it perfectly encapsulates how badly they missed the mark in every way that matters. Not just in the character of Faye, but across the board. How good the cast overall is, or how much money has been put on screen, doesn't help when the writing needed to make the audience connect to the characters and the story simply isn't there. Since the writing wasn't there, the series never got any good word of mouth, few views, limited traction, and it brought exceedingly few new subscribers to Netflix. That's a fail, and the powers that be at Netflix pull the plug on Season 2 right now, rather than to waste any more money on it than those that had already gone down the drain. For the most part, the cast and crew learned of the cancellation the same time as everyone else, and understandingly, they were none too pleased. But like I said before, the best to do in situations like these is often to keep quiet. The series' script coordinator Naomi Markman, who must take a big chunk of the blame for how bad this turned out, chose a different path, as documented by Bounding into Comics. She taunted fans on Twitter with how amazing a Season 2 they were missing out on, to which many responded with variations of, if Season 2 was gonna be so great, where was that talent for Season 1? She did not take kindly to the feedback, and responded with multiple embarrassing emotional outbursts, as you'd expect of someone who previously bragged about putting references to overt communist YouTube videos into the actual dialogue of the show. That is indicative of a certain mindset, and not one which makes someone a suitable script supervisor for a project like Cowboy Bebop. But there's more. In my neck of the woods, there's a saying, there's no standards like double standards, and it would appear there's some of that here too. A few years back, Stana Katic and Tamala Jones were let go from ABC's Castle after Season 8, over a pay dispute for Season 9. In the end, there would be no Season 9, as the whole series was cancelled shortly afterwards. At which point, everyone working on it, every below-the-line crew member living paycheck to paycheck, every gaffer, every technician, every actor and every writer was fired. But at the time, the aforementioned Naomi Markman gave none of the sympathy to those who had lost their jobs that she now demands from others. Instead, she took to Twitter to express happiness about the cancellation, because she didn't like the message it would have been if a series could continue without its leading ladies. Netflix Cowboy Bebop was a failure, and the entertainment media complex made sure everyone knew it was a failure by publishing the news of its premature cancellation far and wide. According to our good friend, writer and producer Kamran Pasha, a big part of the reason for this is that Hollywood views anime and manga as a threat, and one needs only to look at comic book sales to see why, as each and every week, activist and message-driven Marvel and DC books are vastly outsold by story-driven manga books. But if the lesson Netflix and Hollywood at large take away from this is that Cowboy Bebop failed because it was based on an anime and audiences aren't into that, they would be doing both themselves and the audience a disservice. The real reason Cowboy Bebop failed is because the creatives and the writers that Netflix hired to bring the project to life weren't up to the task. Again, I'm sure there must have been some skilled writers there, but if there were, they weren't allowed to thrive or bring their A game, because the Cowboy Bebop writers' room was headed by either inept writers that don't understand story structure, or by political activists, or worse yet, both. Then it doesn't matter how much potential there is in the concept or the source material. No series can succeed if people like that are calling the shots behind the scenes. To reference script supervisor Naomi Markman's tweets, I have sympathy with cast and below-the-line employees who suddenly lost their jobs on future seasons of Cowboy Bebop that won't be happening, as they lost their jobs through no fault of their own. But I have none for the writers and producers, because they shouldn't have been hired in the first place. Them dropping the ball is what lost everyone else their jobs. Let me know your thoughts on the failure of Cowboy Bebop in the comments.